With his 8-foot-tall structure, arms and legs like tree trunks, and glowing red eyes that could pierce through a soul, Ragnar Leifsson the White Wolf demanded attention without having to ask for it. His aura felt heavier than the cursed energy inside Dracula's castle, and while not evil, it was certainly terrifying. Anne-Marie, flat on her buttocks, sat on the carpet in the study in sheer bewilderment. Ragnar slowly turned his head, looking at her crimson vampire eyes without faltering. "Would you also like to go through that window?" he asked. Anne-Marie's eyes sprung open as she shook her head rapidly, knowing the White Wolf just handled Mercer like he was an insect. Usually, stories were exaggerated to make monsters sound more frightening than what they appeared to be, but not the White Wolf. If anything, those stories were watered down. He then walked towards Asmodeus, pinned against the wall by the Reaper's scythe. Ragnar used an open palm and gently pressed the scythe further into the demon's shoulder, while it protruded through the wall from the hallway side. Asmodeus grunted in pain, trying to grab the Reaper's scythe, but who was the demon trying to fool? Ragnar Leifsson, on the most basic of terms, was on a different level. There were only two beings who could properly wield the scythe, Death himself and his brother War. Famine too, if one counted the time she lifted the scythe, but dropped it from the sheer weight and power. But now the White Wolf could wield it as effortlessly as them. Ragnar asked the demon, "Where is the Reaper?" Asmodeus never answered. Even in defeat, the demon kept his foul mouth shut. The White Wolf then wrapped his furry fingers on the butt end of the scythe handle, then gently and ever so slowly twisted it to open the wound up further in the demon's shoulder. Anne-Marie wasn't experiencing the pain, but even she winced in horror. "I will ask again, where is the Reaper?" Asmodeus told him he didn't know. He conjured up a story of how his brothers, Belial and Beelzebub, knew, but not him. Ragnar Leifsson then pulled the scythe out of the demon's shoulder, though not all the way, just enough to impale the demon yet again. Black and yellow, gooey-like substance, presumably the demon's blood, poured out from his shoulder and soaked into the carpet like wine. "The Reaper left his scythe. He would not do that if he didn't think whatever he was in was a trap. This will be the third time that I am asking. If I do not like what you say, I will remove your limbs one by one. And when that isn't enough, I will move to the face. Such big glowing white eyes you have. I do not mind taking them out and feeding them to you." Ragnar's words never scared Asmodeus. Rather, the look in the special class werewolf's eyes, confirming everything he said to be true. The demon told him how Death was last seen with the angel Cupid, and he had no further knowledge. The truth this time. "Why was he with Cupid?" "To close the Crone's portal. Only angels know about the Grigori, and they possess the knowledge and craft able to close the portal. Cupid has accepted to work for the Crones to get his rings back." "How do I find him?" "I don't know, I swear. We cannot track the Grim Reaper or hire angels like Cupid until they are near. For now, they are anything but. The last location they were at was at the Crone's portal. Please, that's all I know." "Thank you," said Ragnar Leifsson as he was going to use his sharp werewolf claws to slice off the demon's head. "Please don't," Anne-Marie interrupted. Ragnar growled, slowly turning his head to look at her. She continued, "He has betrayed Dracula, and he needs to answer to the Vampire King. They have been poisoning him for all these years, controlling him. Please, spare him so Vlad Tepes can extract his revenge." Ragnar Leifsson despised vampires except one. He never needed to listen to Anne-Marie, but he did. He removed the scythe from the demon's shoulder, and Asmodeus fell to the ground, squealing in pain. The demon wouldn't escape the castle. He wouldn't be able to get up. A wound inflicted by the Reaper's scythe was worse than death itself. The White Wolf left the study, making his way through the never-ending hallway, then down the galleried balcony and stairs. He opened the large doors and exited the castle, only to find a wisp of black and crimson smoke respectively swarm and land in front of him. Fillian Hunt and Dracula emerged from the smoke and stood in front of Ragnar. The vampire cop said, "Ragnar, what brings you here?"
"Fillian Hunt. It's been a while,"
said the white wolf as his eyes turned towards Dracula.
"I would never have expected you to be working with the devil."
Fillian dropped his head in shame. The hopeful, warm look in his eyes that showed happiness to see an old friend had vanished. How would he explain to Ragnar everything that had been going on? How would he share the threat of the ancient vampires awakening and looming over the very land they walk on? Dracula then hissed at Ragnar. It would be an understatement that the two powerhouse warriors of the land hated each other. Dracula said, "You dull monster! How dare you enter my home?" Vlad Tepish's eyes turned red, his fangs pushed out his mouth, and he donned a vampiric battle stance. He never cared about the scythe held by Ragnar. Vlad Tepish just wanted to rip the white wolf apart. Werewolves to Dracula were just tools that he could use in the hybrid operation. He felt like vampiric blood was what made hybrid special, not the werewolf genes. Though Ragnar Leifsson never flinched. If anything, with his glowing red eyes illuminating the darkness, he responded,
"I have buried my oldest friend today. Tonight isn't the night you should test me, vampire."
Fillian gasped in horror. "Bertold," he whispered. "But how? Ragnar, I'm so sorry." The vampire cop had been away all this time, dealing with his own problems, unaware of what his friends might be going through. And now when the night felt too dark already, he found out Bertold, the dwarven war chief, leader of the land of Freya, had departed from this world. Ragnar turned to Fillian and said,
"There is a strange, awfully tiny vampire woman in the study. There is a wounded demon on the carpet as well. Do whatever you will with that information."
"Anne-Marie," Fillian said in an urgent whisper and bulging eyes. He dashed a little, then stopped. Fillian looked over his shoulder and said, "Ragnar, this isn't what it looks like. When time permits, I shall explain. Be well, my friend," as he continued his vampire dash entering the castle. Ragnar gave a vague nod of his head and proceeded to walk away, continuing his path. But Dracula sidestepped, blocking it. "Put your hands up, filthy creature," he said to Ragnar. "Let us put this feud behind us once and for all. No Crones or Death himself to interfere." However, Ragnar Leifsson continued walking past Vlad Tepish, but Dracula called out to him and said, "What is it about you that makes you sit on your high horse? Why do they praise you and curse at me? Why do they look at you for help and at me with disgust? You and I, we're the same whether you like to admit that or not. Do not face your back to me, Ragnar Leifsson. Fight me like the warrior you claim to be." The white wolf stopped dead in his tracks. He looked over his shoulder, letting out a deep and ominous growl before saying,
"Praise me. I am known as the Butcher of Harrow. Do you think I can walk freely in this land looking the way I do? Though you are correct, Vlad Tepish. You and I have many similarities. We both are warriors from a very young age. We both served in the wars these people have created. We both have lost our wives and children, and we have been cursed to be monsters. But you know what's the one difference between us? I spent my entire life, human and werewolf, trying to protect this land, and you in your entirety have tried to destroy it. We are not the same. What glory would I have wasting my limited time fighting with a man who has already defeated himself?"
Dracula stood frozen in disbelief. He looked at his now trembling hands, observing the long razor-sharp fingernails. He looked at his palms and saw the blood of the innocent people he had slaughtered in his vampire life. He could lie to himself as much as he wanted, though would he believe it? Were the eerie whispers in the castle convincing him to act on those evil thoughts? Was it a cursed necklace driving his malice towards human folk and the policies of the land? But would any of that occur if those thoughts never existed in Vlad Tepish's mind in the first place? Cecilia Rosenthal wore that necklace for an entire year after turning Vlad Tepish. It poisoned and slowly killed her from within, but she never became evil. She never felt hatred towards human folk or people weaker than her. The vampire duchess remained her kind self with a heart of gold until the very end. When Flat Tepish picked up his head from looking at his hands, Ragnar Leifsson had already left on his quest to find the Reaper. With the storm now subsiding, a weary Flat Tepish entered the castle, slowly making his way to the study. Fillipa, the younger sister of the Crones, walked freely in the human land. She was tasked by Isadora to track down Nasduk, the vampire elder. Josephine received the same mission but chose not to tag along. Fillipa was a rather interesting witch. She had immense power and mastered the dark arts of Maleficium, yet she was controlled by her elder sister's womb. Josephine always questioned Isadora, while Fillipa always listened to her, even if she never understood what her sister had been asking for. However, as she walked in the land of Redwater, her old, wrinkled, rotting face, her large red eyes and needle-like teeth were hidden away from the rainy night. With the spell functioning in real time, Fillipa appeared as the most beautiful woman the land would see. She wore a long, silky red dress, her hair wavy and dark brown and her eyes hazel to the glimpse. Rather than the usual maggots and worms crawling in and out of the opened wounds from her face. This time her skin was porcelain and slightly pale. The witch's lipstick had been redder than her dress, complementing the smoothness of her lips. Her smile rather comforting but with a hint of seduction, and the absence of a foul stench sticking to her clothes was blown away by the warm breeze that night. An illusion, of course. A spell that required an immense level of skill and power to maintain. Though, her actions could not hide the urge of malice waiting to erupt from her twitching fingertips. The path she walked on did not lack the presence of blood. Whoever walked in her way, be it working men and women or groups of families, Fillipa would mutter an incantation under her breath while smiling to their faces, and they would burst into flames. When she traveled further, there was a group of friends drinking ale after the night shift, sitting together and laughing away the troubles of the day. Happiness was Fillipa's pet peeve. Once again she muttered an incantation, used her hands to guide the curse, and the victims' bodies would crumple like parchment. Every bone in their bodies broke, right down to their skulls being squeezed so tightly their eyeballs fell off, and all without her even laying a finger on them. Such was the power of dark magic. She had left a trail of bodies in her path, poisoned livestock, and burnt houses to the ground, but not once looked back. That smile, the eerie giggle, the confident sway in her gait owned the night, though not for long. Fillipa's travel was a tiresome one indeed. Now with a calm breeze and a drizzle, she reached a vacant village on the outskirts of Redwater and the Harrow. When the Hellborn monsters were sent through the Crone's portal more than a week ago, this particular vacant village was the best infiltration spot. It would allow the Hellborn monsters to gain access to the land at a much deeper level. Fillipa, Josephine, and Isadora knew there were not enough allies to stop the Hellborn attack. As skillful as the three defenders were, Balru Caesar, the legendary werewolf, Monrog the Hellhound, and Myra, the Witch of Redwater, they couldn't defend this village during the Hellborn slaughter and keep their own villages protected at the same time. Yet when Fillipa walked through the vacant village, she witnessed the bloodshed that took place. Not human blood, rather Hellborn blood, judging by the dark black and red color. The other identification and confirmation of the slaughtered Hellborn clan was their armor scattered through the gravel and not part of their body anymore. In fact, they had no bodies. Whatever flesh remained of the Hellborn creatures were now splattered across the village floor as minced meat. Fillipa would normally laugh or giggle at the sight of bloodshed, but a massacre as such sent chills down her spine. Shortly after, when she traversed the woods of Redwater, she stumbled upon a slope leading underground, formed within the bedrock beneath and carved into cliffsides. There was a cave with never-ending darkness consuming what the eye could see. Fillipa snapped her fingers and a flame appeared on her forefinger, like her own mini fire torch. When she did so, more than 100 bats flew out of the cave, screeching past her ears, and yet she never flinched. The witch was more concerned of the strange presence she felt within the cave. She knew there was someone there but couldn't see who, not yet at least. Fillipa frowned and entered the cave cautiously. Why didn't the Crones or anyone know of this cave, she thought. The witch never felt power like this before, but as she walked further inside the cave, her curiosity and confidence worked to her detriment. A slender man walked out of the darkness. The small flame from Fillipa's finger revealed only a glimpse of the large bat-like wings flaring open. The strange man's red eyes, thin like slits, were glowing in the darkness surrounding the cave entrance. The witch swallowed her saliva nervously, backing away slowly. The Crones rarely feared anyone, human or supernatural, but Fillipa now knew who had been inside that cave. She was only meant to track him, not to face him. Oh, how she wished she caught him off guard. Nazduk, the vampire elder, walked just a tad bit outside the cave. His priest's clothing was covered in dark red and black blood. Fillipa's eyes grew like saucers, realizing Nazduk had been the one responsible for slaughtering the hellborn creatures in that vacant village. There was not a moment to waste. This was the worst possible situation for the Crone to be in. There was a reason Isadora requested for both Fillipa and Josephine to find Nazduk together, for individually they would certainly die. Fillipa, without hesitation, muttered an incantation that sounded so foul, like gargling and choking. Simultaneously, she extended her fingers in front, bending them at the finger joints and pointing them at the vampire elder. Nazduk burst into flames before her very eyes, as Fillipa's high-pitched laughter echoed beyond the cave entrance. Was this the vampire elder everyone feared? A vampire whom she just killed with no effort whatsoever? But that eerie laughter bouncing off the cave walls slowly diminished, for Nazduk was unharmed. The top half of his priest's clothing turned to ash from Fillipa's burning curse, but his pale skin remained untouched. He stood there with his arms raised to the sides, palms facing upwards, and a smile scarier than the Crone had ever seen. His dark purple-like veins pulsated and crawled on his slender body, starting from his bald head. Before Fillipa could cast another curse, the vampire elder seemingly disappeared before her very eyes and appeared behind her. Gently, he wrapped his cold hand behind the neck of the witch. His grip had no pressure at all, to the point of it feeling like a caress rather than a threat. Then the past echoed in the present, when Nazduk whispered near Fillipa's right ear, just the way the vampire duchess whispered to Flat Tepish. Do you know what I am?
Do you know what I am?
What I am capable of doing?
What I am capable of doing?
Are you
Not afraid.
Fillipa sat in the cave like a grounded teenager. Her curse from earlier had lit up the fire torches inside the cave, revealing how cozy it really was. Nazduk, however, never cared much for light. He thrived in darkness. The Crone could have tried leaving at any given time. Nazduk never blocked the entrance, it was wide open. Fillipa was just as quick as the usual vampire. She could have tried escaping. However, as arrogant as the witch was, she knew the vampire elder would be at the entrance before she could even make a move. His speed and agility were traits that no other displayed. Nazduk sat in front of her with his legs folded and crossed. The dark pulsating veins had disappeared, and the vampire elder in that moment just appeared to be an ordinary priest that provided counsel to someone in need. He said to her, "Before we begin, let's not converse under false pretenses. You reek of sulfur and yet you are no demon. You appear human and yet you have no soul. Why don't you show me what you really are?" Nazduk phrased it as a question. He was soft-spoken and had an eerie level of politeness to him, though Fillipa knew that he was commanding her, not asking. And so she sighed in despair, and the illusion of a beautiful woman wiped away from her body as quickly as a gentle breeze passing through the cave. She was now her true self, an old, wrinkled, rotting witch that looked uglier than the foulest creatures in hell. So much so, the vampire elder showed disgust in his expression when looking at her. Though Fillipa's hands weren't tied, she sure as hell felt like it. What good would dark magic do against the vampire elder? His curse came from the gods, not from a mere blood exchange bite. "Were you the one that tried to take Fillian's heart?" he asked.
No, oh goodness, no. That was my sister Josephine.
One would expect some resistance from Fillipa, even a glimmer of hesitation or reluctance, but the witch gave up her sister as easily as breathing. Fillian Hunt is my son. Not biologically, of course. I humbly ask you to leave him alone. It would be wise for you and your sister to stay away from him and pretend this conversation never happened. Fillipa was silent. The witch did a tremendous job at hiding her fear, but Nasda could tell from the eyes. Respectfully, you seem really old, though I presume you aren't older than me. If you were, you would have known who I am and wouldn't have entered the cave. And I only bring up your age to ask a question. Do you perhaps know what happened to Cecilia Rosendahl?
Well, the Duchess killed herself, but again, we had nothing to do with that. Your quarrel should be with the Wizards of Three. They were the ones that poisoned her with blood contamination. I sought you out to strike a deal with you. My sister Isadora.
I wasn't done questioning you. My love would never do such a thing if she didn't believe it would be for the greater good. They wanted her heart back then, and now they want my son's. You're trying to resurrect the ancient vampires from the underworld, are you not? Fillipa was smart. She nodded her head nervously, answering truthfully. When the vampire elder was kind enough to strike a conversation with you, it would be wise to show him the respect by answering something he already figured out. Though it was strange. If the underworld witnessed how a Crone, one of the most feared witches in the land, had been reduced to zero in that moment, the monsters of hell would find it rather comical. I do not need to ask you about who you serve because I know, but making an offering to Lamashtu is the biggest mistake you could ever make. I know not why anyone would be so evil to awaken such a demon. Tell me, witch, have you ever been possessed? The crone said nothing, but Nasda continued as if his question was rhetorical. When I worked as a priest for the High Council, many victims were brought to me, men, women, and children who had suffered the torment that hell brought upon this land. I prayed with and for them many a times. I saw how their bones broke, how their joints would snap and dislocate, how they would lose control of their bodily functions, and they will to fight the demon that's torturing their soul. And I stood there, witnessing the horror before my very eyes. I saw teenagers being dragged to the doctors and being falsely accused of seeking attention because apparently nothing was wrong with them. Why would you and your sisters wish to resurrect a vampire demon of such evil to this world? You do know Lamashtu has been defeated before. What makes you think she will succeed now, especially when I'm around? This was the witch's moment. The vampire elder had let his guard down, trying to reason with her. Fillipa levitated in the air while her hair rose like wavy worms. She muttered incantation after incantation, curse after curse, and they bounced off Nasdaq like his skin deflected them. He got up to his feet, shaking his head in disappointment, like there wasn't one of the most powerful witches in front of him, trying to kill him. When spells didn't work, she charged at Nasdaq, trying to claw his face off, but the vampire elder merely dodged the attacks without even looking. Nasdaq, with an opened palm, struck Fillipa's chest. The witch flew and bounced off the cave walls like a pinball. She got up to her feet, looking angrier and scarier than she ever was. Her eyes were round and red. Her teeth were so long that it went beyond her decayed lips, and her skin turned pale and crumpled. She ran towards Nasdaq the way an animal would, emitting sounds that were not normal for a human to make. She roared, grunted, and hissed at the vampire elder while trying to take his head off. Nasdaq headbutted her as Fillipa fell to the ground instantly. He grabbed her by the ankle and dragged her out the cave, though not slowly. He ran at the speed of light as Fillipa's face dragged on soil and stone. When he stopped and turned her over, the right half of her face had been completely peeled off. She tried getting up, latching her slender fingers onto Nazduk's pants, but he pressed his foot on her chest, pinning her to the ground. Though his attention was elsewhere, so many folk have fought the Crones, and very few have lived to tell the tale. But Nazduk wasn't even bothered by her anymore, like he was done playing with his food. Instead, the vampire elder looked up at the sky towards the Harrow. A small portion of the sky had turned crimson as lightning flashes became more vicious and more rapid. The thick clouds began spiraling and swirling. Distant thunder echoed through the night, and the vampire elder now had a look of worry on his face. He observed this phenomenon before. A ritual had been taking place. An offering. Fillipa's blood-curdling laugh stung Nazduk's ears. "It's too late," she told him, while he looked down at her on the ground, still trying to get to her feet.
"The ancient vampires will soon be awakened, and there's nothing you can..."
The crone could not complete her sentence. The vampire elder had stomped the witch's head as it splattered on the ground. As Nazduk turned into a wisp of black smoke, traveling in the air through the night, making his way to the location beneath the crimson sky, Fillipa, the youngest crone, had been killed. 1 down, 2 to go. After a while, Fillian Hunt and Anne-Marie were outside Dracula's castle. They had been looking for Mercer. While the vampire mercenary had been flung out the window by Ragnar Leifsson, the impact incapacitated him but never killed him. Mercer managed to escape. Where to, Anne-Marie didn't know. The vampire cop and the woman in black searched the surrounding areas to no avail. Fillian covered tracks on the ground while Anne-Marie patrolled the night sky, looking for the vampire mercenary. However, throughout their search, they heard the torturous screams coming from the study. What had been sent between Dracula and Asmodeus remained a mystery to Fillian and Anne-Marie. The betrayal cut deep. The Wizards of Three had served the Duchess under false pretenses. They poisoned her with a cursed necklace, which in turn was orchestrated to bestow upon Vlad Tepes. But Dracula never cared about himself. The Vampire King had completely lost it when he found out the Duchess had killed herself, rather than the blood contamination as the Wizards of Three told him. He thought about how those 3 demons masquerading as old men had resorted to such extremes of even removing the wooden stake from her heart before Vlad Tepes buried her all those years ago. He thought about how she gave them a home, and they lied to her face. Curses, disgusting looks, hurtful remarks made to Vlad Tepes never concerned him anymore. He had grown accustomed to it. But towards Cecilia Rosendal, well, that was asking for that. All that pain, anger, suffering, and manipulation Vlad Tepes had endured for all those years had now been gushing out through his hands. Asmodeus probably wished for Ragnar Leifsson to come back, with how severe the torture was. Meanwhile, Nazduk, soaring through the air in a dark wisp of smoke, had been making quick progress towards the location beneath the crimson sky. And then he wasn't. He had been knocked down mid-flight into an abandoned village, stumbled and rolled on the ground, and got up to his feet in one swift motion. A witch gently descended from the night sky to the ground. She wore a black hooded robe-like cloak, but her long hair was still visible in front of her shoulders. Her skin pale and her lipstick darker than the night, though not as frightening as her eyes. Nazduk felt like he was staring into the abyss. Isadora stood opposite the vampire elder, facing him. Nazduk knew this witch was different. She intercepted his path, was strong enough to knock him to the ground, and all without making a sound until impact. With her clothing resembling Fillipa's, Nazduk said, "Which one are you now, Josephine or Isadora?" Though Isadora never answered, she wasn't taken aback by how the vampire elder knew who they were. Instead, she pieced it together. The vampire elder would have met with one of them to know their names. Isadora looked above and behind her. She saw the crimson sky and the dark clouds turning. A ritual had been taking place, and not only would Josephine be strong enough to conjure up a force like that, she would also be the one to ignore Isadora's orders. Hence Isadora asked Nasdaq,
"What have you done with Fillipa?"
The vampire elder showed Isadora the underneath of his shoe. "Some of her might still be under here," he said. Isadora's expression never changed, but the witch had been fuming with anger. The lack of fear in her demeanor had also been frightening. The vampire that stood in front of her was not a merely low-class blood-sucking creature. This was Nasdaq, the first vampire of the land, and Isadora never cared because she knew something that very few did. She took a deep breath and removed the hood from her cloak. Nasdaq expected the illusion of a beautiful woman to disappear, just the way Fillipa's spell removed from her body in the cave. But Isadora never needed to do that. The spell of illusion demanded immense power and concentration to maintain. And yet Isadora's power, even while keeping the spell active, was still strong enough to fight the vampire elder. Nasdaq sighed. He never had time for this. With dark smoke engulfing his entire body, he dashed towards Isadora faster than any vampire had ever moved. He positioned his long razor-sharp fingernails to claw the witch's head off. This was a killing blow for sure. And then impact was made. The sound echoed through the village louder than thunder. However, Nasdaq's hand stopped inches away from Isadora's pale face. The witch had positioned her forearm diagonally across her face, stopping Nasdaq's attack at his wrist. The vampire elder was staggered. His eyes never widened in disbelief, rather narrowed in confusion. With him and Isadora at each other's faces, the witch laughed.
I'm going to enjoy this.
Back at Dracula's castle, Fillion Hunt and Anne-Marie stopped their search. Just before they could move, the demon's headless body slammed to the ground right next to them. Both Anne-Marie and Fillion looked up at the same time, only to find Dracula standing at the castle balcony. He then tossed Asmodeus's head as it slammed to the ground and rolled a great distance away. Vlad Tepes never said a word. With his head down, he stretched his arms and grabbed the railing of the balcony. Then his attention had been diverted. He picked his head up looking towards the east and saw the crimson sky above the village of Harrow. The vampire king knew the Harrow was home to Ragnar, but what on earth was the white wolf doing to conjure up something like that? When Anne-Marie and Fillion reached the balcony, she told Dracula that it wasn't Ragnar. Fillion looked in the distance and he backed away in horror. The stone wall inside the village of Harrow had been destroyed, the wall that separated the village from the largest graveyard known in the land. Anne-Marie's large bat-like wings kept her hovering in the air while she got a closer look. "It's Josephine," she said in absolute horror. Before they knew it, there was a large disturbance in the woods of Redwater, in front of Dracula's castle. The lightning illuminated Dracula's eyes as he saw the undead making their way to the castle. Josephine, the middle sister of the Crones, always did things her own way. She hated taking orders, and what she wanted from the very beginning was to kill Dracula. Fillion stood next to Vlad Tepes, feasting his eyes on the army that charges forward. Anne-Marie couldn't speak. She couldn't believe how many of the undead Josephine had resurrected through necromancy. Dracula told Fillion and Anne-Marie to leave. His expression was stern and cold. He told the vampire cop they had his blood and they were using it for the ritual. It would be wise for him to stop the Crone before the ancient vampires were summoned. Dracula also commanded Anne-Marie to go with Fillion, but Fillion refused. He said, "You have to understand something, Vlad Tepes. The undead heading for the castle aren't ordinary folk. The graveyard in the Harrow contained bodies of the greatest warriors that fought in battle since the beginning of time. There are hundreds, if not more, making their way here. You will not survive this onslaught by yourself." Dracula took a deep breath in and gave a smile, though not arrogantly, rather comforting. "Then I shall die trying," he said. Anne-Marie stayed behind with Dracula. She couldn't leave her vampire father to die alone. And as the undead army marched through the woods of Redwater, commanded to destroy Dracula's castle and kill the vampire king himself, as well as Nasdaq facing off against Isadora, the most powerful witch of the underworld. Fillian Hunt soars through the air in a wisp of dark smoke, making his way to the graveyard to finally battle against the Queen of Necromancy. The Vampire Cup Finale Part 2 nears its horrific end.